Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Thoughtful Talents Show. I'm Jen Werner.
And I'm Chad Ahern.
In this episode, we want to share with you our insights and about the CliftonStrengths talent theme of achiever. Chad, what does Gallup say about the talent theme achiever?
So the official short definition from Gallup says people exceptionally talented in the achiever theme work hard and possess a great deal of stamina. They take immense satisfaction in being busy and productive. Now, that sounds like a lot. Jen, you have this theme far higher than I do. I believe it is your second highest theme. I happen to have it as it still stays within my top 10, but it is number 10. So since you have a little bit more intense, I want to start us off by asking, how does your achiever show up? And yeah, what does that look like?
Yeah, that immense satisfaction in being busy. Oh, it absolutely rings true. I would say I am always busy. I'm a hard worker. I'm happy to jump from thing to thing. I love projects I can start and finish on the same day. I really can't stand when I don't have all of the information. So if I'm waiting on someone else, sometimes I even want to just like do the busy work to find out that information so I can keep working and not stop. Like I want to just work on it and get it done. So I like sometimes I'm happier to just do the work myself than to have others involved. So I think that does make me lead more to that, making me an individual contributor. And I'd say like for that being busy, it's being busy all the time or feeling like I'm busy all the time. So even like days off, I need to do something with those days. We talked about it in the pre-show a little bit. Like when I'm down, like not doing anything, it probably means I'm sick. So even on my off days, even on weekends, I want to be doing something. I want to have a plan. Like where are we going to go? What are we going to do? What should we fix? What should we work on?
Excuse me.
Or regularly doing more than one thing at a time. I don't know if that's like some, activator mixed in there as well, but yeah, definitely love to be busy.
Yeah. Well, we know from Gallup's research that none of our talent themes work in silo, right? So I'm already hearing activator because you want to get things started. Even some of the things that we talked about on our last episode about responsibility, about making sure things are getting done, is huge. Jen, one of the components that I have experienced and heard from, and I do it a little bit myself, as I said, I don't have it quite as intense, but something that always seems to come up with achievers is this idea of like the to-do list. And I'm just kind of curious, like, do you keep a to-do list? How do you keep track of all the things you want to do or have done? Going back to that sort of immense satisfaction of being busy. I know some other achievers love to, get the dopamine hit of being able to check things off. So I'm kind of curious, are lists part of your life? How do you prioritize? What gets done through your achiever?
It's so good that you asked me that, because no, lists are not part of my life at all.
Really?
And I'm wondering if I'm the only achiever. So that might be my pitch when I put this out to the world, is because I don't know. Honestly, when it comes to things I want to do personally, I might have a list, but it's not like, an actual on paper list of things I want to do, or even like in my keep notes on my phone. It's more of a, oh, hey, here's some like books that I might want to read someday, and I might make a list for that. But if there's places I want to go, I'll like pin these places in Google Maps, let's say. So I don't actually have a list of all of these things anywhere.
Okay.
Like something where I can actually check them off. And the same is true with work. I tried it because people are telling me that, hey, lists are the way you get things done. It's how you get your priorities. And
Right.
I'm like, yeah, it doesn't really work for me. For me, my list consists of usually my email. So who wants things? And then it comes down to like how do I prioritize and how am I going to get these things done? It's like really 3 factors: who I love the most.
Oh, okay.
Who's lacking, who is really needing something from me at this moment, and who's the loudest. So like if they're going to be loud and yelly at me, okay, might bump them up a couple more spots. But if I love you and you are someone that I just love working with, and I know I can count on you, you know you can count on me, I'm going to be there for you every time. So I think that's where my responsibility kicks in,
Yeah.
and really what helps me prioritize those things. Because without a list, yeah, you're right. Like I know that that's a thing, but it's just not with me. And for my achiever to be so high, I was really surprised about the whole like making a list thing. I'm like, yeah, I don't really do that.
Interesting. So part of the reason I asked the question is, even though mine is not sort of as intense as yours, mine comes at number 10. I do have a list, but it probably looks very different, and it probably comes from a slightly different place than yours.
Sure.
But that's part of the reason why I wanted to ask the question, is that everybody I've coached around achiever typically has a list. And then I know I do as number 10. So I figured it was almost guaranteed. And so
Right.
when you and I start talking in the pre-show about you not having a list, I was really kind of surprised by that. So I wanted our audience to hear that.
Yeah, the other thing about the list too, is I think I was explaining that yesterday, is my activator is really overpowering sometimes. So I might have a list of things to do, but 7 more things could get added to that list. And if I don't add them to the list, I can't check them off. So I feel like I end up just being this like maker, or like, controller of the list. Like I need to add the things so I can check them off.
Oh,
And I don't know if maybe that has something to do with my discipline being low. Like that's just not the way I prioritize things. So
okay.
it's just different for me, I think.
Okay. One of the other pieces that we briefly talked about in our pre-plan, our pre-show, you had talked a little bit about sort of the appearance versus the reality of achiever.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you could maybe highlight that and what you meant by that
Sure.
for our audience.
Yeah. So when they talk about achievers being people, or people with high achiever being those that work hard and possess a great deal of stamina, that stamina can spread across all kinds of things. Definitely looks like work ethic, like a really great work ethic. They're hard workers, pull up their sleeves, dig right in. On the other hand, though, it could be about any kind of work. So you could look like you're, heads down, really busy, barreling through a bunch of things, and you might be doing busy work like sorting emails, or, doing some things that maybe aren't, you get sidetracked almost to like, oh, hey, I want to work on this, and want to deal, because it's something you can do it. Like it's all that work that gets you that like dopamine hit, like you were saying.
Yeah.
So I do think it can get you, it can fill your achiever to be working like that and doing these like small little projects that can come up that you can get done. But on the other hand, they might not be as productive to the big goal, or what you're headed for.
Okay.
So it can have the appearance of a great work ethic, but you need to be making sure you're doing the right things, right? Like we want to be productive overall. And while sorting my emails does help me be productive and more disciplined, I understand what the priorities are. It might not be the best use of my time in this moment if I really should be focusing on something else.
Okay. Anything else you want to add before I add my little 2 cents?
I think I'm good for now. We can talk about the benefits and how these negatively affect life in work in a moment.
Well, so before we get there, I did want to add a couple of things. I know my achiever talents aren't quite as intense, but I think that there are a couple things that are worth noting for others that might have achiever, and some things to think about. And one of those is whether achiever sort of pushes or pulls. And by that, I mean, for me, my achiever is actually pushed by my responsibility. And, people can listen to our last episode about responsibility. That really drives a lot of my action. At the same time, achiever likes the idea of getting things done, having that to-do list that is really kind of formulated from a responsibility side. But then the achiever really likes to see those things done and know that you're making daily progress. I think that's one of the things if you go to Gallup's resources and look at the much longer definition, there's a lot about every day starts at 0, and that you need to make some sort of progress. So whether it's you get 2 things done or 20 things done, it's that incremental. There's some sort of almost like a score. You know, you're not still at 0 when you put your head down on the bed at the end of the day. And so I think that that's something to keep in mind when you're either working with somebody with Achiever, or if you have it yourself. Where does that fall? Is it getting pushed by another one, or is it kind of pulling along, which kind of what you've alluded to is your Achiever kind of pulls everything along. The responsibility is, hey, I've got to get all these things done, so my responsibility is going to help me do that. Or your Achiever kind of brings along Activator, and your Activator then helps make sure that Achiever starts things. So I think that's a really interesting dynamic. I think you know, one of the other differences in my Achiever, given its sort of lower intensity, and one of the practices I've tried to work on, is realizing that, you know, you mentioned about taking a day off or taking rest, that for some Achievers, actually starting to think about rest as an action to fulfill can actually bring energy while still giving you your rest periods. And that's just something I want to throw in the mix as people think about their own Achiever, about how that comes across, or how you can actually use Achiever to get rest or to take advantage of a day off.
That's such a great point, because I know for me, as with the Achiever so high, when I don't get things accomplished during the day, I do feel like a failure. Like this, I wasted this day. Like I rested, I sat around, I loafed, I enjoyed the sunshine. I didn't do anything today. And at the end of the day, I can feel like, oh, I didn't do anything. And I'll regularly say that to my husband, we didn't do anything today. And he's like, it's okay. You needed a day off. You needed the day of rest. So it's good that he reminds me of that, because then it doesn't feel so bad. You're like, you're right. I did need a day off. I did need a day of rest, but my Achiever really craves that feeling of getting things done.
Yeah. And I think tied with that, just going back to sort of the scorekeeping, scorekeeping is probably not the right term, but that idea of, did I get at least one thing done, or did I get at least 10 things done? I think it's also moderating what sort of score you need, or the number of activities that you need to have fulfilled in a day, to make sure that your Achiever is fulfilled, but not leaving you frustrated. So is it just 2 things? If you got 2 things done on a day of rest, is that enough? Or is it that you have to go full tilt and have 20 things done, so that you avoid the feeling that you're just talking about, well, even if I got these 20 things done, I'm still frustrated because I didn't get 30 things done. So I think that's another sort of a mindful, it's not mindfulness, but it's being mindful of that capacity, or that component around Achiever, that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now that we've kind of covered a couple of the ways that Achiever has shown up for each of us, and some maybe implications for others, let's talk a little bit about sort of the positives and negatives of, like, how has Achiever helped you in your life, and how has Achiever kind of maybe shown its darker side in your life? Maybe the negative side of having Achiever talents so high.
Yeah, sure. I think definitely the benefit for me is it keeps me moving. Nothing in my life really gets stale. That hard worker, the stamina one, I definitely believe that that's a benefit too. So I can regularly work for long hours, right through meals, through breaks, and actually get more energy by doing the work than I would if I stopped and took a break and then continued on. It also, though, has a, like, you know, the double-edged sword there, because you can't just work yourself to death and not stop for a meal or a break, or to get out of the sun, because you end up, you know, starving, passed out, and sunburned, you know. So like you have to do it, you know, take everything in stride. And I think, like you said, like actually scheduling the rest time Making time for rest, making that one of your like to-do items if you do lists and that's what you do. Scheduling that stuff in is absolutely helpful because you do need that space and time. The other way I'd say it's definitely been a benefit for me is I really like helping people and I like having the answers or finding the answers. The busy work to me of finding an answer for something is really rewarding. Like it's
Interesting.
filling my responsibility because I know that someone's leaning on me and I was able to help them, but doing the work to get there is just as rewarding.
Ah,
So
interesting.
I thought that was something that was a benefit to having Achiever, is that like the doing things actually getting something out
Yeah,
of that. Yeah.
nice. Um, you started talking about some of the darker sides. Before I get
Yeah.
to my positives, I'm kind of curious if
Yeah.
you want to flesh out any
Oh,
additional
sure.
sort of that darker side of the sword.
Yeah.
The two-edged sword.
Right.
You know, what are some of the downsides of
We touched,
not taking care of your achiever?
yeah. So we touched on that, that like, my priorities thing, having so much to do or doing so much, being achiever, being busy, having so many things on my plate. So for me, negatively, this impacts me when I can't say no to things and I just keep taking it on. And we talked a little bit about the pre-show, in the pre-show yesterday about the pop-up in the corner of your email that pops up
Oh,
that tells you
yes.
that you got another email. So like it could be a mixture of some other strengths going on here too that I'm not
Yeah.
able to ignore that, or just possibly it's hard for me to just circle and like dive into something. But it is it's something that feeds me. Like if I know I can do that and get it done, I'm like, oh, I can just work on that right now. But that tends to take up all of my time. So if I'm not careful, I can push myself to the point where now I'm like trying to achieve too much in the small amount of time I have. And then that can put me in a really frustrated place where I just
Yeah.
stop working because now I've lost the
Okay.
priority. I don't know what should be next. I have too many things that are begging for the attention. And without that, like really understanding of my own list and what's fully on it, that does for me personally, I can get into a place where I'm just almost stop and have to literally stop then and find like what is everything I'm supposed to be doing because I feel like I'm going to miss something. And that feeling like a failure, even having to like give something up to someone else. So again, that responsibility coming through, or just not getting it all done. If I get to the end of my, go back to my email, look at those lists of things that I wanted to get accomplished, and I'm like, oh, I didn't get that done today. Like I feel the
Yeah.
like weight and the heaviness of like, oh, I didn't get everything I wanted done. That I think can just put a cloud on achiever when like I should be looking back at all I did achieve and
Yeah.
celebrating that, but I don't bake in celebration. I'm like from one thing right on to the next and then look back at it like, oh, I didn't do enough. Like you were saying, like that list of 10, list of 20, but really I wish I would have gotten 30 things done, but I'm not appreciating just how much I've accomplished.
It's interesting to hear you talk about the emails coming, the email notifications coming through. And as you're talking about that, I was reflecting on, there's that old adage of, well, if you can finish it in a minute or two, just get it done now and get it off the plate. Mm-hmm. But if you fill an entire hour that way, yes, you got 30 or 40 things done, but that's a whole hour or two that you might have actually or should have been utilizing on a higher priority item. So
that goes back to that appearance of work ethic at that point, because like, yeah, you did get all those things done, but they probably weren't the most important things that you could have been working on right at this moment because you had to have this done by a certain time. And now you pushed it off doing those 30 little things. Yeah.
And so I brought that up because one of the other things you mentioned in your pre-show, and I was hoping that you'd bring it up again, is, turning those things off, to help our fellow achievers stay on the priorities, shut off the notifications, shut off the tones that we get every time a new email or appointment request comes through to our calendars. Can be a way to sort of flip that or at least moderate it in a way that can be beneficial.
Yes, absolutely. I was definitely going to bring that up when we talk about activator too, because that is one of those, like us who love to start things, like you can't be interrupting us in the middle of something that we're working on, because if that sounds like more fun, we're going to stop and work on that.
Yeah, yeah, the more fun piece. Everybody, let's go find the fun. Jen, what are the other, I'm going to jump actually on the negative side first before I get to my positives, because I think one of the other pieces that you brought up or got me thinking about is sort of that nose to grindstone idea. And I know for myself, well, I would not necessarily describe myself as a pure extrovert, loving social situations all the time. Achiever can actually take us away from those things. And we can sometimes get a little bit more obsessed with the work versus the people we're doing the work either with or for. Yep. And I think you'd even mentioned in one of our past conversations, as you and I have gotten to know each other, about having your head down, doing the work, and then all of a sudden you raise your head and everybody's gone or everybody's off doing something else. And because you've, myself included, have gotten so obsessed with getting the work done that we kind of miss out on maybe the social interactions or the fun conversations that happen in the hallways. Yeah. Having to constantly go and think we've got to get one more thing done is something that can have a negative impact on our relationships with others.
And I think it depends on where your achiever falls in your other talents. So you and I are pretty strong executing talents,
right,
as well as you have a lot of those strategic thinking talents, which also puts you like heads down a lot. So whereas like I'm barreling forward through the work and your heads down, learning, digging through all of the information,
thinking,
and getting it to be heads down and working and barreling forward too. Together, we would be these, loners, heads down working. Well, the rest of the group is like excited, celebrating what just got done, and it like you can feel like you're either frustrated by others that they aren't heads down like us, or the other way around, they're frustrated by you because you're heads down and hey, this is like supposed to be team time, like join me in this. And we're like, yeah, but we could be working on this next.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely something that our fellow achievers probably wrestle with, and maybe we've given them some ideas about, toning that expectation down for themselves so that they do get to a chance. One of the other things, just going back to the sort of benefits, one of the things that I will say is, for those of us that do keep lists, and we've already sort of touched on a little bit, that dopamine hit of bringing the energy from checking things off or getting things done is a way to make the day enjoyable. So, I hope that others around achievers understand that they're looking for that benefit. They're looking for that energy that they get from consistently having a to-do list to do, and actually getting those things done actually brings them energy. And it's not just about, while others might be getting their enjoyment from the social engagement, achievers are going to get their enjoyment in their day from, getting the to-do list done. And I think that's the other part is, how big is that thing? How important is that thing will impact how much energy or how much juice or energy they get from it. But I also think, like you said at the beginning, the benefit of this theme is to keep things moving, not having things be stale. I know I benefit from others that have achiever, because sometimes my deliberative and analytical keep me in sort of a trap place, and achievers like yourself would be like, well, wait, we got to put this on the calendar. We got to get this done. We got to get this moving on this. So there is a really nice benefit for there.
It's definitely in that, like the rush comes from the getting it done. So we are very focused on that end goal and getting to the finish line. But I think it's also important to notice, like, we can't skimp corners in that, in those places either. There might be times where we're more inclined to like just get it done than to get it done right, maybe, or exactly perfect. Like now we're gonna maybe have to go back and redo something. I think you talked a little bit about that yesterday too.
Yeah. And I definitely want to bring that up again about when we start to think about the negative impacts on a team.
Yeah.
But in terms of on the personal level, for you and I it's helpful for people to hear kind of how that talent brings us some energy or benefits our lives. So speaking of others, I'm curious, how we've already talked a little bit about you being, seems to be an anomaly about lists, but other than that, are there other ways in which you've seen this theme show up differently in maybe some of the people you've coached or people that you've worked with that have that share the achiever talents with you? Are there other things you want to add that maybe some of our other listeners might connect with?
I see it the same with a lot of people. It's that drive to get things done, the hard worker. Like I see that in every achiever. Those with achiever talents.
Those are the achiever talents.
I definitely see that in everyone who has it high. Just it is so very strong. But I do think our other strengths, like we were talking about last time with responsibility and how that tends to like season all of the rest of our strengths. I think just like that, achiever is seasoned by everything else that's around it. So depending on where your other talents fall, you might be more inclined to like achieve about personal relationships and different things if you have a lot of relationship building talents. So it is about taking things farther, going farther in getting to the end of something, but it might just feel a little different depending on what other talents you have. We talked a little bit about the difference in like feeling like we're in flow, because that's something achievers love, is having that feeling of being in flow. But that nose down piece can look like another talent. Did you want to talk about that?
Oh yeah. So I think where you're going with this is that, one of the places I've seen achievers show up in, or how I've seen it show up in others, is it almost starts to look like focus. That stamina, the long drive, the wind of, has kind of that nose down on a particular task, because the achiever knows that they're going to get sort of, again, that dopamine hit and that energy at the end of at the end of it, whatever that entails. When they complete it, that then feeds that virtuous cycle that you were talking about before of, the endurance. Even though it looks like hard work over hard work over hard work, as soon as you get to the end of something, you get that re-energization, and then that takes you into the next, project number 2, and you finish that, and then so it keeps cycling up. But the difference, I think one of the things we were talking about is achiever, if they're doing a lot of little things, you're still achieving, but that's not necessarily that's flow, but not focus. Because you're in flow of getting things done, which is what achievers love to do. Whereas focused tends to be, and again, this is a generalization. I'm sure there are, people out there, and hopefully, some of our listeners that have focus that might experience this a little differently. But in general, focus is about a singularity, a single project taken for a long period of time. And that's where I think the two kind of overlap, the flow and the focus. I would also just bring into that conversation, something that we really started to discover about our achievers even before the pre-show is the importance of timeframes. And again, bringing in sort of that seasoning of other themes. One of the things I've noticed about some clients I've had around achiever is that if they have, say, futuristic or an election, that they tend to also have longer time windows that they are willing to experience with their achievers. So they might be looking at projects over a week, month, or 6 months. Whereas I know you and I have talked about your activator is like, if it can't be done in an hour, I don't care. If it can't be done in a day, I don't care.
Yeah.
Whereas,
those are not the things that would feed me. Whereas, yeah, those
right.
futuristic people would probably, futuristic and positivity or achiever together probably would love to have these, like long projects out there and be able to know that they're getting there. Where I'm like, we talked about that too yesterday. Like if we're building a big pyramid, they might see like the big pyramid, right?
Yep.
But I'm like, each little brick is like the next thing that like powers me to get the next thing. I'm more focused on that, the small, the tiny details, and if we can get that done.
Yeah. And so I just think that's a really important differentiation to make, because, for those that might be listening to this, that are team leaders, that are, have an achiever on their team, what timeframes are most important to that person?
Yeah.
Where or when do they need, as much as achievers might not take time to celebrate, when do they need that celebration of, hey, you just achieved that, let me re-up your energy on top of what you're already getting from completing that task. And so, an hour a day is very different than somebody that has a 6-month time window and is completely fine getting a big jolt at the end of that 6 months. So just something to think about. I think, one of the other things that I've noticed with others I've coached is it also has to do with breadth versus depth.
Yes.
So you've talked a lot in this episode already about having multiple tasks to do. So a lot of breadth, but not a ton of depth. Each of them is accomplished in a couple minutes or an hour or maybe a day.
Hours. Yes.
Right. Whereas somebody with, say, like my learner makes me a really deep investigator. I can really get focused in on achieving a particular task, but I go really deep with it. Again, we're kind of getting back a little bit into that focus minded application of achiever. But just knowing that there's a difference, achiever at breadth versus achiever at depth.
Right.
I think it's a really big difference.
And I'm sure mine, excuse me, I'm sure mine is the breadth because of that activator. Like I'm about starting and ending the project. So, having both of those working so high and in my top 5, it is really about that movement and keeping things going. So for me, anything that has, too long of a lead time for it, or I can't see the finish line, I would rather just break it up into a million little pieces. Otherwise, it will really drag me down. It won't feel done. And that not done feeling is what brings the achievers down.
Yeah. So again, just something for those that are leading or partnering with those with achiever, understand, are they going for breadth? Are they going for depth? And at what time frame? So 2 really important pieces. So when, one of the things that we as human beings love to do is attach images to ideas like this. So like we've done in previous episodes, I'm kind of curious, do you have any particular images that you love to think about or reference, or maybe colleagues of those with achiever could keep in mind when they think about achiever, what images they should have in mind?
The first one and the only one really for me is the Energizer Bunny. Remember those commercials with the Energizer Bunny? The other batteries die and the Energizer Bunny just keeps on clapping his little drum. That's exactly what I think of with the Energizer Bunny. And it looks a lot like my favorite Parks and Rec star, Amy Poehler, as Leslie Knope, because you could see her just jumping from thing to thing and working on everything, achieving everything. So yeah, those two, the Energizer Bunny and Leslie Knope.
Yeah. And those are 2 awesome ones. I love the Energizer Bunny one. I'm going to add one other one that we struck on, and we've already mentioned a little bit, is that Great Pyramids idea, right? It's that close-up view of the Great Pyramids where you see each individual stone, and knowing that achievers sometimes might be more focused on laying each individual stone than they are on putting the whole thing together. It's about lining up and getting each stone laid. The other one, it's almost a no-brainer in terms of an image, but it's the checklist.
Oh yeah.
It's those pads you see in the grocery stores or the discount stores where you get the little boxes all down the side. It's all it has to do is fill in what you need to do, and then you get to check them off. That's a great one to keep in mind for those that are maybe partnering.
Most achievers.
Yeah, most achievers. Jen is our beautiful exception here. So, all right. So those are some images. Now, we've talked a lot about us as individuals and how it's shown up in some of our clients. What does this look like in terms of its best contribution to a team? We're thinking about, we've talked a lot about the solo nose down worker, but that's got to have some benefits. So talk to us a little bit about that, especially since you have it so high. What's been the benefit to some of your teams or teams you've seen achievers on?
Yeah, I think the two of the big ones are, really understanding their need, as if you have team members who have achiever high, really understanding their need is to get things done. So they might be like really encouraged about those deadlines and making sure those deadlines are hit, because they want to get it done actually before the deadline. If they can get something done before it's due, ooh, even bigger dopamine hit, like so excited, I got this done in so little time. And that they will work hard, like long hours if necessary, and might even help keep that momentum for the team going, because every little achievement inside the big achievement, every little achievement, they get a high to keep going. So I think that's where it can definitely be have some of the best contributions to the team.
Okay.
As far as a team leader goes, a team leader with achiever, I think they can help set the pace and encourage that those deadlines are met. So if they don't have a team that has a lot of high achiever talents in them, the team leader themselves can help, set that momentum, give some of that momentum, roll their sleeves up. If they're also hard workers, they're going to want to get in there and get their hands dirty too. So they can help actually pull the team along, like you were saying, whether it's that push or pull of achiever. In that achiever talent, this is where a team leader may be able to pull their people along with them and encourage that those deadlines are met.
Okay. Yeah, I would echo everything you just said. I'm going to add one additional thought, which is that this goes back to the checklist that we were just talking about, but it's one of the other benefits I've seen and heard of, and even a little bit for myself, is keeping track of all the things that need to be done. Mm-hmm. So it's especially if you have an achiever that loves to keep checklists, they will know how to fill that in. That list may not be prioritized, and that's something that they might need a complementary partner around, but they will have the list for you, because they will want to make sure that everything's being done, so that then they get that energy again, either for themselves or for the team.
Or like we said, if they don't know the priorities, maybe they want to look at my love, lack, and loud.
There you go.
Which people do you love? Which things do you love? Which things are lacking? Which things are going to be loud if you don't get it done? So you can use my L's.
Yeah. So as we've talked about, each theme can have sort of a double-edged side to it. So let's flip this around. And while we don't always necessarily want to end on a negative, let's think about some of the negative impacts that achievers can have, so that team members, colleagues, team leaders can be proactive in addressing them, so that they don't take them in some dark places. So I'm going to defer to you again, as you having it so high. What are some of the negatives?
I think team members who have achiever high can be really frustrated with the work pace of others. So understanding, and just me, even as an individual contributor like I am, and being put on a team, and we talked about this last time with the responsibility episode, when we talked about getting on that team in high school, and you're with the other people, and you're they're not going to do any work. I don't want to be on a team with them. So it's that understanding who else is on your team, and really trying to bring part of that focus together right from the beginning, like maybe splitting up the work a different way, so that your achiever talents feel like they can do the hard work, but not feel like they're being drugged down by another team member.
Mm.
Because it's a really icky place to be when you feel like you're the only one doing the work, but the work they're doing is important. They might have different talents than you and be really living and working in those talents. They might have those, like, let's just throw some examples out. Like they might have some futuristic talents. So they're thinking big picture or maybe ideation and all the different ways it can be done. Whereas you as achiever, having achiever high, you might be like, nope, this is the way and this is what we're going to do. And I'm headed for the end goal. And you've just like completely pulled me out of my lane to come and look at this other idea. And you're like, no, we're already doing this one. We're like 5 minutes from being done. And so it's that like understanding that we all have different things to bring to the table, and being able to just be in the uncomfortableness of sometimes of people not working at the same pace you do, and understanding that there is positive intent there always, to get things done. We all want to get there, but the achiever is really hard focused on that getting things done. So that's where it like can sometimes negatively impact the team, because we are so hyper focused on the end goal. That would be my one. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah. So there are actually a couple I want to add. You brought it up briefly a little earlier in the show, but it can negatively impact the team if achievers don't take the time to celebrate. So, we know from research from Gallup and other organizations, the value of recognition, praise, and celebration, right? It's taking that time as a team or even as an individual. But in this, since we're talking about teams, the team needs that time to celebrate. And you're going to have people on your team that aren't getting the energy hit from finishing stuff. They need the actual celebration time with team members. And if achievers are all off, kind of doing that grindstone thing that we were talking about before and not participating, that can degrade the team camaraderie and collaboration and feeling of cohesiveness. So I think that's one place where achievers, if they get ahead of themselves or aren't, putting that celebration almost like a to-do item, just like we were talking about with rest, that it can lead to some negative impacts. I think one of the other components is that, and I think you even hinted at it a little earlier, is that activators might be so anxious to get something done that they rush out and do it before they may either have all the information or have considered doing things in the right order. So that sort of rush to achieve can have a negative impact. If then you have to go back and completely redo the thing, you haven't really achieved anything. You've now just given yourself another thing to achieve, which might be energizing, but it's depleting for the team around you. And so there's a component there that those that have achiever talents need to be cognizant of. Yes, it's great to go out and get the to-do list done, but let's make sure we're doing it the right way the first time around.
Right.
Or at least really close.
And that's where I've struggled with that achiever and activator, because I do love to get things started and finish them. So there have been times where I rush into something and I do it and then get more information. I'm like, now I have to come back and do it over again. And then I'm like the same, like sometimes I even have to like, okay, slow down, like, hold on. Do I have everything I need first? Is there something I didn't think of? And luckily, I have some other talents like deliberative in there to help me like sort some of that out. But with having the too high, and if I wasn't stopping to think about some of it, that could definitely lead me down to that cycle of constantly doing and redoing. It is something I don't like is to redo work. But because that doesn't give you energy when you have to redo work. But getting it done and really being able to get through the projects are so rewarding. But that definitely can pull a team down. If you have those, bulldozers, I'm going to call them, like in this point. And that's where I was kind of thinking, even with the team leader having achiever high, that's something that can be negatively impact the team too. Is if they are so focused, hyper focused on finishing, that they have the potential to kind of bulldoze the team too,
Yeah.
right? So like we might, like, hey, we got this great project done, we've been working on it a year, everyone else is so excited, like, yay, it's finally done, and they're like, okay, and now, like, no, not now, like now is time for celebration, not like, now let's jump into the next one. Because that can absolutely happen with achievers. They're so high off of that last achievement that they're ready to jump right into something new.
Yeah. I loved hearing you say that, because we've talked so much about, leaving people behind or leaving people burned out because you're essentially dragging them along. The image actually that comes to mind for me is not necessarily a bulldozer, but somebody, operating a water ski boat. If you throw the throttle so fast that you yank people out of the skis, they're smacking the water at 40 miles an hour. That doesn't feel good. And same sort of,
probably won't get back on the skis next time.
Well, gotta think twice about it.
If you're driving.
Right. Yeah. So I think both analogies work, and things for team leaders to be cognizant of, especially if they're the ones either throwing the throttle or running the bulldozer. One other piece that I would sort of throw into that mix too, and this probably has a little bit more to do with the individual contributor role, is and you've touched on a lot and been very open about it, about doing the right things.
Yes.
So if an achiever is doing all that busy work, sorting their email or reflagging things or putting the files away, all helpful, but are those your biggest priority action items? And so one of the other pieces that those of us with achiever talents need to be cognizant of in terms of impact on a team is, are we really driving at the highest priorities? Are we using our achiever in service of our team members and what they're trying to achieve? And keeping that in mind, because if we're not, then we're doing a disservice and having that negative impact on a team. So something else to keep in mind with how it impacts the team.
And I'll share too, Gallup realizes that, in building the content around the achiever talent theme, they realize that that is something that achievers struggle with, is that that need to get things done, and that the priorities sometimes can be blurred in that sense. And so one of their, suggestions for that is finding someone even with high discipline to help figure out what that priority needs to be. And I will tell you, everywhere I go and every job I've always had someone who has high discipline on my team or close to me that help me really look through those priorities, because you can't have multiple priorities, really. Like, we really only have one. We can only do one thing at a time. Well, now if you want to do 3 things at a time, well, you're probably not going to be as good at them as if you just focused on the one. But that's where really having someone else who can take that step back, who has that ability to take that step back and have that bigger picture feeling, is really great as a friend, a confidant, a team member to have close to you if you have high achiever and don't have high discipline. Mine is very low.
Do you have to remember how low, just so people, our listeners, can get a sense of?
I think it's number 31. So yeah, it's pretty low. It's not the bottom, but it is very low.
And for those looking for partners, those of you that are listening that might be looking for partners, if you can't find somebody with discipline, I will also make the suggestion of somebody with either responsibility, deliberative, or consistency. Consistency and discipline often run in sort of tandem tracks a lot of the time. They can apply, and we'll talk more about that in a future episode. But those are some other potential, I think Jen highlighting discipline as a great pairing. I think is a wonderful first step, but we know that not every team has somebody with discipline. So here are some other options. So Jen, we've gotten to essentially the end of our core questions and sharing our understanding with our listeners and our watchers. Is there anything else you'd want to add before we sign off?
I think my key takeaways for this would be to know that you have the ability as a person with high achiever talents. You have the ability for this like long, hard work, and that people will find mass benefits in what you can pull together and what you can get done, and they will love you for it. So be comforted knowing that people will love that you can get things done. But don't forget to celebrate, because the team, others, we can't just be alone and work all on our own all the time. We need others. So remembering that celebration time is important, and to celebrate what you've accomplished, not get to the end of the day and be like, I only did A, B, and C. Be happy you did A, B, and C, like, and enjoy and celebrate those things.
Yeah. I think that's a wonderful wrap-up statement. So with that, I think we're going to sign off. I'm Chad.
I'm Jen.
And we'll see you on the next episode.